Okay, hi. Today is the 16th of September 2020 and it's lecture number 5, I hope, in Anthropology and the Human Condition. And today I'm going to be talking about Lévi-Strauss, Claude Lévi-Strauss. He's a French anthropologist who died about 3 years ago, aged 101, which means he was born in the 1910s, something like that, 1916, something like that, 1915, I'm not sure. I have said earlier in the class that if you read any one book in this course, of course you should read 10 books. If you read any one book in this class, of course you should read 10 books, but if you read only one, it should be Lévi-Strauss's book, Tropiques. Tropiques. I think I've got a picture of that. I haven't. Tropiques. Anyone know what Tropiques means? Sorry?
I think you just asked me what's the Spanish.
In English? Tropique? Yeah, and in English? Tingan? No. So I don't know whether the translation has the same connotation, but tropiques in French. Anyone? Ting fap? No ting fap? Anyone? No? Tropiques is hard to translate. So if it translates into Vietnamese, it means something like sad, triste. It's tragic and sad. So it's the tragedy of the tropics, or sadness for the tropics, or the tropics meaning the verdant tropical climate countries that French colonialism was in. Okay, so Algeria and Vietnam, Indochina, and New Caledonia, French Guyana, those places. And Lévi-Strauss is kind of sad because he had a romantic idea that he wanted to go to the tropics and find the pure, untouched people that anthropologists want to find, but also sad because colonialism and capitalism have destroyed the tropics or have caused so much damage. And it's tragic that the West has destroyed the tropics, but also it's tragic that he even thought that there could be some romantic experience in the beautiful culture of the tropical world. He wanted to go to the Amazon, the jungle, and find there the people who were untouched by civilization or something like that. And he's a bit sad now because he realized that was stupid. There was an assumption that was a bit racist. To think that a French person can go there and find the perfect tribe and have an experience of understanding them. Something? To think that a French anthropologist, what? When you're ready. To think that a French anthropologist can go to the jungle and find and understand an untouched tribal group. Do you need to have some time outside to recover from this? Don't even do it. It's university, right? We're here for serious reasons in the university. So Lévi-Strauss wants somehow to make contact with a tribal group that are unsullied, untouched by civilization. But that's a stupid project, a racist project, to think that there is any way that a Frenchman should be, first of all, able to do it or allowed to do it, or can just do it. Assumes so much. So he's a bit sad for his tragic belief that he could just go to the jungle and find a tribe and study them and bring back the truth or something like that. He realizes that this is not possible. So he's famous for doing this work with the Nambikwara and the Bororo. The Nambikwara, well, we're not even sure that we can say the Nambikwara were one tribe or one tribe separate from some others. There was a guy called Rondon who went into that area before Lévi-Strauss, and it seems that the Nambikwara weren't even called the Nambikwara when he arrived. But anyway, by the time anthropologist Lévi-Strauss gets up the Amazon River, after traveling for so long, he tries to understand the Nambikwara and Bororo. And this is what he's famous for. Famous for having gone and transformed anthropology at the time of colonialism, coming towards its end actually, and made us focus on some new ways on what people do and believe. So I've given you the writing lesson as a primary reading. If you want a commentary on that reading, there's this essay by Jacques Derrida in The Violence of the Letter in Old Grammatology, which I can get for you as well, or you can find easily online. A fantastic, detailed study of Lévi-Strauss's work. But Lévi-Strauss is famous for really transforming anthropology into its next phase. So we talked already about Victorian anthropology, which was all about sitting at home collecting stories. Then we talked about Malinowski and that's called structural functionalism, looking at the reciprocity of exchange systems, gifts and the cooler ring exchange system and so on. And that was dominant in anthropology for a long time. And then we looked at Evans Pritchard and lineages, kinship systems, kinship anthropology or something like that. That was another period. Well, Lévi-Strauss starts a new thing in 1955, and it really catches the imagination of anthropologists everywhere, so that most anthropologists in the 1960s and into the 1970s had become what's called structuralists, structural anthropology. And that's what Lévi-Strauss has transformed. But he started off with studies of totemism. Do you know what totem means? No? Totemism. It's very interesting, I think. A way of thinking about society, making sense of society using the animal kingdom, animal world. So Lévi-Strauss studies the information we have about Australian Aboriginals. So without going to Australia, he doesn't actually go there, but he reads everything by Stanner and Spencer and Gillen and so on. And in the study of totemism, which has not been really a topic for anthropology for 30 or 40 years, it had been ignored since the time of the Victorian anthropologists, Lévi-Strauss makes us interested in it again. Totemism will be something like, say you all were one tribe in Australia. I know that's not possible and so on. But if we were an Aboriginal tribe, then some of you, let's say this group, will be from the kangaroo totem. And that means you are kangaroos. You're sort of, they know that you are human, but you are with the kangaroos. And you will be with the goanna, a kind of lizard, right? Big lizard. And you will be the emu tribe. Okay? And you will be the kookaburra tribe. Kookaburra kind of bird, laughs a lot. It's funny. Goes, anyway, doesn't matter what it does. Now, each moiety or each group of you, according to your animal, then has responsibility for that animal in the world. So you have to do special kinds of rituals, ceremonies, dances, songs to keep that animal's spirit going. So to keep the world to be a kangaroo world or a goanna world or a emu world or the world of kookaburra. And if you're in the world of kookaburra, you have some songs that sound like the kookaburra. But you cannot eat kookaburra. When you go hunting, nobody actually eats kookaburra anyway, not much meat, not a tasty bird. But you're responsible for a life of restoring kookaburra. The same with you. You cannot eat emu. Emu is your totem animal. That means you don't eat that animal. Everybody else can, but you don't know. You sing songs and do dances to support the existence of emus. The same for goanna, the same for kangaroo. Right? Your song and your dancing, like dancing like a kangaroo, right? Didn't do that on camera. And not only that, this is a way of making sense of society. So kangaroo people can marry goanna. Goanna women can marry emu. Emu women can marry kookaburra. Kookaburra women marry koala. You cannot marry anyone else. Actually, it's more complicated than that, but that's how the system works. So you have a responsibility and an identity that's shaped by this. And it seems very different to what we do until you start to think about, I don't know, how we have similar things like football teams. You can either be blue or red. Manchester City, blue, yes, good. Manchester United, red, bad. I think, anyway. Okay, so we divide up like that. Or in Australian rules football, you can have an animal symbol for each team. Melbourne Demons, the Collingwood Magpies, Hawthorn Hawks, Sydney Swans, Brisbane Lions. Okay, it's not exactly the same because they don't do, well, they do dances and singing, they do chanting and supporting, and they dress up to support their team. but they don't do marriage according to that football totem. I mean, but it's really true that, it's not really true, it's almost true that someone who supports Manchester City will not marry someone from supporting Manchester United, because they're just horrible people. I'm sure that Manchester United people think that about City, and they fight too. But that's what totem is anyway. In the kangaroo, goanna, emu, kookaburra scheme, and there are more animals, of course, lizards and a koala and echidna and so on. The totem system is an environmental responsibility. So Lévi-Strauss comes back to this topic after it had been ignored for 20 years and rethinks it and shows us new things of understanding how this is a system of classification of the world. It's not just false belief. It's the creation of a way of thinking about the world and explaining differences in the world and managing differences in the world, using animals as a kind of counter, as a way of calculating. Okay, so then he goes up the Amazon and gives us this book, Tris Tropiques. And Tris Tropiques is so famous, this book. It's been come out in so many different copies. Very interesting just to look at the cover of the book. This is the collection of, I have about 6 of these because I kept some for the covers. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 of them, in fact. I have 6 of them. Anyway, he goes up the river, the Amazon River, right, which is the biggest river in South America, and goes up and up and up, trying to find the Bororo and the Nambikwara. But he doesn't go for very long. He makes 3 trips, I think, but doesn't spend very long with each tribe. It takes so long to get there. It's so difficult to go so far up the river in those days. Transport was hard, the river was strong and so on, that he manages only a couple of weeks. And he doesn't learn the language. So how can he understand anything? If you don't learn the language, you're working through a translator, you don't understand that much. You can do a little bit and you can learn a few little words. Like there's one part of the book where he plays a kind of game with the children. He's playing with the children, anthropologists do this kind of thing, playing with the children, and he sees that this child and this child are fighting with each other. And when this child is mean to the other child, this child runs up to the anthropologist and whispers something in his ear that he didn't understand. Then the other child notices what has happened and runs up to the anthropologist on the other side and whispers again, another. And what they are telling him are their secret names. So every person has a secret name that no one should know. But if you want to hurt your friend, you tell me their secret pet name. But then you found out what was happening, so and then the anthropologist worked out how to find out the names, the secret names of everyone by playing one off against the other. And oh, he told me your name, so what's his name? And he finds out the names of all the children and all the parents by tricking them. Anthropologists are like that. They cheat, they trick. Not good. Tricking is not good and unethical. But anyway, he's gone upriver. He doesn't learn their language. So what can he do? Can he do? Now the thing about anthropology we learned quite early from Lévi-Strauss, in fact, is that you project your interests onto other people. Trying to find meaning. You find the meaning in your head and you project it onto people. So here's the book, the first edition of the book with the drawing that he made of the people, Bororo people. And what they do is they tattoo the face. Has anyone got any tattoos they want to show us? I can't show you mine, they are on my foot. Okay, but these people tattoo on the face. So Lévi-Strauss couldn't really afford them. Give you a friend an elbow. I also want to do that, so not fair. If I have to stay awake, you have to stay awake. So they tattoo on their face, right? And Lévi-Strauss saw these, and this was something that he could try and understand. And they are very interesting tattoos, right? Imagine a people with the, I mean, he didn't use a photo. He drew their faces. It's not that he didn't have a camera. He did have a camera. But mostly he drew the faces. And not only that, he drew the tattoo of someone's heart. It's very interesting. We think of heart like this, right? These people, they draw a heart like it's a bottle, like a vessel, which is inside his life, or blood, or spirit, or something, right? But they have tattooed it on the skin. What is the meaning of the tattoos? Of course, there must be some meaning. So he's trying to work out why there's this meaning. And the first move of everyone is to project something, your own understanding, onto another thing. He sees these patterns and he says they look a bit like playing cards. You know, like the Jack of Hearts or the Queen of Diamonds or clubs or something. There's something like the design you see on the back of poker cards. That's a Western European civilization concept being projected onto another person to think that they are like that. But that's the first move. You see it on several of the books, especially on this drawing by Lévi-Strauss as well. Where you really can get the idea that these are like playing cards. But these things must have a meaning for the people. And he becomes more and more interested in trying to work out what is the significance of this pattern. And you know the pattern. Here, the face is kind of drawing the face into different quadrants. Something here, but here. And he wants to somehow abstract the pattern from the face. And we see that in the covers. The third edition, or the first English edition, I think this is, of the cover gave up with even showing the face. Just shows the pattern. All right? And the pattern, it's really bad in this, on this projector. Oh. Bit better? Yeah. Ah, why? That was a different one. Danger. Electric session. Okay, so this version of the book, which is the English I think it's not the first edition, the second edition in English in American, because look, it's, you can see it's $3.95. $3.95 for a book. Oh my God. Now they are 24, 28, 30 something dollars. But what's important is the structure. It's like in quadrants. And Lévi-Strauss has been influenced by Ferdinand de Saussure and his course on general linguistics. And he wants to kind of think, okay, not just playing cards, they look like influenced by playing cards, but really this is some kind of language. And that's the metaphor he projects to try and understand them. First of all, this is something like a language, but instead of words we have shapes. But we can work out a kind of structure or even a grammar of this language. So he can't speak the language of the Bororo or the Nambikwara, but he tries to understand the language of their tattoos. Of course, by the time this edition came out, which was the cheap paperback for the English market, pocket edition, $2.75. They have a face, but it's not actually Nambikwara Bororo. It's a mock-up cover. They put a face and they put the diagram over the top and made it much more like the diamonds. That's pretty interesting. What is the grammar though? What is the meaning? He's unable to tell us yet. He knows they have significance and they are reflected in the culture. But what is the meaning? By the time we get to the 1980s, structuralism as a trend in anthropology is changing, is becoming less popular, displaced by post-structuralism and other modes of analysis. So the covers of this famous book don't emphasize the face tattoos anymore. They start to emphasize society or the individual, right? Because post-structuralism came from 1967, Derrida's commentary on Lévi-Strauss, but in the 70s, structuralism was still strong, but post-structuralism took over more and more in the 80s and 90s. Okay? You with me? In the 80s and 90s, post-structuralism. What was post-structuralism? Things like after structuralism, the analysis of structuralism suggested to people like Roland Barthes and Michel Foucault that the stories or the diagrams have their own grammar, and even the people who make them. And so in literature, the people who tell stories are not the best people to understand them. Even an author does not really know about the significance of their story. They might not be the best person to tell you what it means. Somebody else can come from outside and explain it better. Lévi-Strauss, of course, wants to do this. Okay? You think that's a bit weird? That his theoretical concept of meaning ends up making the analyst the one who can understand meaning, not the person that made the thing, made the story or drew the diagrams or painted their tattoo, tattooed themselves. I think it's a bit weird. But by the time we got to the late 80s, early 90s, nobody would do structuralist analysis anymore. And it went out of fashion completely. Completely out of fashion because people said, but this is just invented out of the mind of the anthropologist. Yeah, maybe so, but then Lévi-Strauss's book still had so much to offer, and his work still had so much to offer because it gave us ethnographic details of the Namikwara and the Bororo and all of the tribal groups of the Americas. Okay, so we're talking about North America and South America, especially around here, but later his work goes up into the Americas and especially to the Canada East Coast. Now, why is it important now still? Because in Lévi-Strauss's work, looking at structure, he's making a comparative project that will find what is similar in all thinking for the universal or the human mind. Well, he makes a distinction between the modern and the pre-modern, if you like, but still. He's sort of on the path of trying to find what is universal, but also to criticize those who have done this before. So he's very critical, first of all, of those who think about collective unconscious. He means Durkheim and so on. Or those who think about archetypes. He means, well, Freud a bit, but mostly Carl Jung, Freud's disciple who broke with Freud, but still. They had a concept of the archetype or the collective unconscious. And Lévi-Strauss said, no, that's not right. We can't consider content and be comparative because what is content in your conscious or unconscious is different content in another person. But what we can compare is the basic structure, the form in which you have arranged your meanings. And while you'll have very different meanings in another culture, you'll have a similar form. That's why it's called structuralism. So they find the structure of knowledge or the structure of meaning in one culture and compare it to the structure of meaning in another, not the content of stories. It could be about football here and about kangaroos here, but the structure is similar. A way of using things in the world to make sense of the human world, and so on and so forth. Now, if you do make comparisons that football teams use animal symbols and people in moieties in Australia use animal symbols, that's just a kind of coincidence. What you need to compare is the gesture or the process or the activity of structuring your life according to those groups, structuring your life according to those animal groups. Then you can say there's something similar. But if you say the football team is called the Kangaroo, the North Melbourne Kangaroos, like there really is a football team like that, it's not the same as the moiety kangaroo. Of course not. So, right, a comparative study of Indo-European, American, African myths is certainly valid. Mythologies can be, and what he does in the next 30 years is study mythology, myth, right? Stories about the origin of the moon and of fire and how we got, right? What are myths? Myths are stories that tell us how some group discovered fire or why there's a moon or a sun or where the babies come from, etc., etc. Mythology. You can study and do comparative study of mythology, but you cannot work this at the level of content, right? It's not a matter of identifying what the myths say, because what the myths say is somehow projected from the person who's reading them. But the way in which they say it, that we can tease out. So it sort of doesn't matter for Lévi-Strauss that he is projecting his own interest into the myth and finding their meaning. It's the structure of that meaning that he thinks is universal. So when we finally get a photo of someone, when he manages to meet and talk to these people, okay, he can only talk to them through a translator. He's trying to understand why they have this kind of tattooing on the face. I believe that the Nambikwara were kind of amazed that he was interested in their face tattoos. I mean, they kind of said to him, why don't you have... For them, this practice is super normal. Is there anything that we do that you would think is the same? Does anyone have a tattoo? Would any of you here imagine getting a tattoo on your face? Would you tattoo your face? No? Not even your eyebrow? No? What about some big fangs teeth for Halloween? Okay, you wouldn't do it. But we do some weird things with our face, right? You use lipstick? Sometimes? Yeah, very strange. You paint your face. We do that. We paint our face and they would think that's so strange. You use paint and then you wipe it off on each other on the cheek. When you got lipstick, you kiss someone else and you leave a lipstick mark. Very cute. They would think that's... Of course, now we don't do that because COVID, right, etc., etc. Now instead we wear masks. They would also, I'm sure, think that's strange. Any face tattoo, would you consider it? But you will do lipstick. Maybe not, but some people will do lipstick. That's also strange. This is not so strange. All right, but that's not what Lévi-Strauss was about. Why is it that pattern? What is the meaning of this? And he tries to understand this in terms of structure. Because he can say, yes, there's a pattern. Right? Whatever, you can work out. And it's not completely symmetrical. This one is got like this, and this one like this. But there's some meaning to that. So let's try and do structural analysis. That's the lesson today, is how to do a structural analysis. I'm going to try and do it with two myths. Now, Lévi-Strauss will say, probably you shouldn't try and study your own myth. But let's forget about that. This is how you do. First, you have to gather your story, get your material. We are going to look at the myth, something from Hollywood or from Disney, so you all know it, maybe. Children's stories are like myths, they're not the same. So I'm choosing a children's story about Snow White. You know the story of Snow White? Well, so there are several versions of the story of Snow White. You collect them. Get the story of Snow White, you collect them. Collect your various versions of the myth story. Snow White is not a myth, but it's like a myth. It tells you something. And then you work out what's called the armature of the myth. I don't know if my translation of armature is correct. You have to work out, the myth has oppositions, right? The structure of any story will have a format, and you work out the format. Think of, I don't know, what's the last romantic drama movie you saw? There's a boy and a girl, they meet, they fall in love, it all takes a little while, but it's all exciting and so on. But then something happens, they get distance from, they have to go through a crisis and whatever, and then something else happens, which means that the boy realizes his mistake and they resolve it and then they live happily ever after. There is a structure to a story. We call it plot. Okay? You understand what plot is? What is plot? What is plot? Then, be with me. Plot is something like structure of the story. Boy meets girl, they have a fight, something else happens, the boy apologizes, they get back together, live forever after. You've got the movie. Or, I don't know, a boy meets girl, but she's upper class, he's lower class. They go on a boat. He sneaks upstairs outside, meets her, they do some dancing together. Then the boat sinks and he tries to save her, he dies, end of story. Okay? How could you make a film about a boat that sinks and think it would be a success? But it was. So what you have to do is work out the plot or the structure. The structure, and you do that by looking at what are the oppositions in the story. So what are the oppositions? Boy and girl, ice and fire of love, maybe, Titanic, living forever or living in a full life, dying when you're young, I don't know. You think of the oppositions, you think of the forms, and you think of the relationships in your story. All right, so I'm thinking Snow White, I'm going to think about the wicked stepmother, the dwarves, the 7 dwarves, Snow White, the hunter. Form will be the kind of story. Is it a romantic story that goes through a crisis and leads to resolution? Or is it a day-by-day narrative that leads to disaster or tragedy? Or something like tragedy or horror or drama or Western, good boy, good guy, bad guy. You look at the relationships, and not just relationships between people, but also between things, because it's mythology, and between animals. All of these things are given in mythology, they have special magic powers of meaning. And then you work out how the oppositions are moved by the story. This doesn't mean the movement of the story of plot, that the boy meets the girl and then they learn something and then they live happily ever after because of what happened. But because some contradiction in the story is then shown to break down, and that allows you to learn the lesson. That's what moves. A contradiction is there, a problem is there, but by telling the story, that problem is solved by a new contradiction that kind of fixes their old problem. You'll see it more when we've gone through Snow White and one from Vietnam that I want to do with you as well. But we'll do Snow White first. What's the story of Snow White? Does anyone know the story of Snow White? Can tell me? Anyone? Okay, look, I've jumped ahead. I put down the main parts of the story. I'm going to try and convince you that Snow White deals with two problems, but this is me projecting the problems onto the story. I think it deals with the problem of hierarchy and jealousy. Jealousy is a major problem in our social structure, the Snow White world, right? And we need to find how to solve that. Jealousy. And the other one has to do with work. The relationship of work to success or to happiness. Okay? So Snow White, right, you know that she gets poisoned by the witch when she doesn't obey, she doesn't stick to the one rule that the seven dwarfs had. Don't go out of the house. So when you're alone, don't leave the house. Right? And I think that we focus on the relationship between the mirror and the glass coffin because they are magic materials. And also life, truth, and the fantasy prince, the kiss. So that's where there are different stories. Let's go through this story more carefully. So what really happens in the story? First of all, the mother jabs her finger while sewing. She's working, right? This is very important. Remember this. She's working and then she does something wrong in her work. Jabs her finger. So that's an interruption to work. She was sewing, she interrupts, jabs her finger, makes a mistake at work, but then she bleeds onto the white snow. And that makes her think she would like to have a beautiful daughter with snow white skin and blood red lips. That would be so beautiful. Lips, what did I tell you about makeup? Lipstick. We focus on that, it's very important. It doesn't just mean lips and love and kissing. It's got all sorts of other meanings. Blood red, fire, sexual organ, everything. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about. She sees that blood drip on the snow and imagines and wishes she would have this daughter. And then, surprise, surprise, 9 months later, she has a daughter. That is not how you get babies, right? But in myths, you'll find that's where do babies come from is a great story in myths that many anthropologists mistook for thinking that indigenous people didn't really understand sex. They thought that babies came from the gods or storks or something. But that's just stories. Okay, but in the story, that's what happens. But when she has the baby, she dies. Tragedy. But in this story, that's not really the main tragedy, which is a bit weird. Why doesn't the story solve the problem of the queen dying when she gave birth? She did work wrong, she died. Okay, I think it does solve the problem, but we'll get back to that. The father, the king, gets married again, almost straight away. I think what happened is the king, they published in the newspaper or something that the queen has died. And so some woman who thinks, my chance, she got dressed up, put on lipstick, she went and seduced him and became the new queen. She is what we call a gold digger. Opportunists looking for their chance, right? Putting on lipstick to seduce that king. The message here is going to be that if you are king, maybe you should not get so easily seduced. But let's wait and see. This queen, this new queen, this stepmother of the baby, right? The baby who will become Snow White. The stepmother is quite vain. She seduced the king, sure, she went like the mixer, and she has a magic mirror. And she goes to this mirror every morning, and what does she say to the mirror? Say out loud, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Yes, she asks every morning, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And the mirror says, you, my queen, you're the loveliest, blah, 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 blah. Okay, all good until Snow White becomes 16. And the ugly duckling is turned into a beautiful swan. And the mirror says, mirror, mirror on the wall, blah, 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 blah. I cannot tell a lie, my queen. There is one more beautiful than you, right here in your house. It is your stepdaughter, Snow White. Dramatic music and so on, and she flies into a rage. She's angry. So she is jealous. She orders a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her and bring back her heart. But the hunter cannot kill her. Can I have your undivided attention, please? Okay? The hunter cannot kill her. She's so pure, pure as the driven snow. He cannot kill her, and instead kills a pig, a deer. Different versions of the story. Kills an animal, a pig, a deer, and brings the heart. I think pig because the heart of a pig is similar to a human heart. Brings the heart back to the wicked queen to show that he's done the deed. But instead he said to Snow White, run away, go and, run into the forest, never come back. Snow White runs in the forest for I don't know how long, and she's tired. She comes across the house of the 7 dwarfs. Now, this is important for me. I think this story is also about labor relations, about work. The king is great and good, and he gets to do what he wants, and has always got a wife. Even if one dies, he marries another one. The workers are small. They're dwarfs in the story. I mean, there's lots of workers usually, but in this one there's 7. The masses, right? The masses are insulted by their dwarfs, and they live in this terrible, messy house. They live all together in a messy house, right? It's the underclass. But Snow White, because she's got better breeding or whatever, and she does the right thing, she enters their hut and thinks, well, there's no one here and I really need a rest, but if they come and find me, well, I'll tidy up first. And she tidies up their house and then goes to sleep. It's not the one with the porridge and the chair and the bed more so. No, that's the 3 beds. Anyway, the dwarfs come home and they see that she is tidied up. First of all, they're a bit shocked. How dare you touch her stuff? But then they see how beautiful she is, and they kind of adopt her as a new mother or something, or as a mother or communal wife. I don't know, but yeah. Imagine what you will. Okay. They tell her never to go out of the house or the classroom. No, tell her never to go out of the house because of danger. But the mirror has said to the wicked queen, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Thinking that Snow White's been killed, the queen is expecting to again hear, oh, it's you, my lovely. The mirror says, no, no, she still lives. She lives there in the forest with the dwarves. So the queen comes to try and kill her. And she tries 3 times. It's always 3 in myth. I don't know why. The first 2 times, the dwarves save her. I don't know, electrocution and some other thing. I can't remember what. But the third time she's tricked. She's tricked with the wicked queen dresses up as a saleswoman and has a beautiful shiny red apple that she so wants. And you know the first one is free. So she gets this apple, bites it, and it's poison and sticks in her throat. and she, Chetloy, right? She's dead. But she's not dead, right? And in the story, we have to know that. We have to know she's not dead. Right? And anyway, the dwarfs think she's dead, and the dwarfs put her, because they're miners and farmers and they have all sorts of esoteric knowledge, they can do glass blowing and stuff. They put her in a beautiful glass coffin in the middle of the forest, in a grove in the forest. And she sits there dead for all the world to see, until from another land, area outside the kingdom, comes a great prince plodding along on his horse, and he hears from the dwarfs this tragedy that Snow White had died and she's there in the coffin. And the prince says, well, she should really be buried in the castle. So I will take her there. Now there are two different versions of the story. In one version, she's so beautiful, he falls in love straight away, even though she's dead. And he kisses her, and she comes back to life. This version also happens in Sleeping Beauty. Is this what princes do? They go around the countryside kissing dead girls? That's what it is. We call that, what do we call that? There's a word for that. What is? Necrophilia. Having sex with dead bodies. Anyway, they just kiss. And the apple is dislodged and she comes back to life and they, oh, I love you, right? The opposite of Romeo and Juliet. Or in the other version, the more standard Grimm's family version, the prince puts the coffin on the back of his carriage and takes the long road through the forest to the castle. And going over a bump, because it's a long and windy rocky road and there are tree roots in the way, goes over a bump and that dislodges the apple from her throat. She wakes up, the prince turns around and boom-bitty, boom-bitty, boom, and he falls in love. And then they go back to the castle where she can be properly buried. So yeah, the carriage she's using hits a bump, a tree root or a log. The jolt dislodges the poison apple in her throat. She wakes up. The prince falls in love and asks her to marry him, which she accepts. The wicked queen is still jealous, but the grand prince also has magic powers and he forces her to dance in some special slippers, which mean you can't stop dancing, and she dances till she dies. She's pretty mean, but anyway, maybe she deserved it. Of course, there are many variations of this, okay? Now, what do we have to do to make an analysis of this? We need to accept the parts. We have to gather now where's the, collect the versions of the story. We've got different versions of the story, the different kiss or bump to recover. We have to think of the oppositions, the forms, and the relationships. So here are the I've got no space. Here are the oppositions. Can you say what they are? And what we're going to do is we're going to try and make a kind of map of the architecture of the story. All right, and we want to do it on a grid, something like this. This is our oppositions. The first opposition we have is going to be sewing. And what is it? Blood or pain? She jabs her finger. right? The blood comes out, but the blood is Snow White. The blood drops onto the white snow. Snow White, white snow, and the blood drops onto it. So there's a kind of cosmological parallel between blood, pain, and the beauty of Snow White and the royal queen doing her job. The father, he's the king. Okay? And he marries the stepmother, who is something of a she's a gold digger. She's easily jealous, self-centered, and she is the opposite of Snow White. And maybe the mother, in a way, mother is fantasy beautiful as well. She's wicked, kind of a witch. And she has a mirror. Let's put the things here. She has a mirror. And the mirror is magical. So in the story, what is the thing that is like the mirror? That will be its in a relationship with the mirror, or its opposite. Can you guess what that is? Okay? The mirror, mirror on the wall, which speaks the truth. The mirror, mirror on the wall thing is speaking truth. It's always true. But the glass coffin, made of the same materials, is not speaking the truth. It's transparent. You can see through it. But it doesn't tell you that she is not dead. It's a coffin, so you think she's dead, but she's not dead. So in a way, the mirror and the glass coffin are related but opposite. Okay? Okay, Snow White is beautiful, but she falls into trouble with a jealous witch. And she has to go to the forest. Castle, forest, right? And in the forest, underground in the mines, are the 7 dwarfs. The 7 dwarfs are workers. How do we know they're workers? Because they say they are workers. Hi ho, it's off to work we go. They say they are workers, right? So they are the working class. They are the normal people. They are the real opposite to the king up on high and his wicked queen and the old queen and the prince from outside, right? They all live up high, and here are the workers. But Snow White travels into the forest, and she survives because she cleans up the workers' house. She works, and she stays okay in the forest, even though the queen tries to come and kill her 3 times, so long as she works as the workers told her to. The dwarfs had said, never go out of the house. Stay in the home, do the cleaning, be a good wife. And when she does, because she is seduced by the apple, the poison apple, which looks so beautiful, she bites into it and she dies. Although she is not really dead. So here's the movement. She has been poisoned and died, but this opposition of jealousy, pain versus good life and work is resolved by the fact that she's resurrected from the dead by a kiss or a bump on the road, whatever, from the prince. The prince does something completely unexpected, which affirms, like he hears the story from the seven dwarfs, which affirms her life amongst the seven dwarfs. And then she rises from the dead, comes out of the glass coffin, which was a lie, unlike the truthful mirror, and she gets to take her place as the new queen. What's really interesting is the necessity of the glass coffin. The dwarfs made this coffin. It's almost like they had to do the one thing. They always work well, but the one thing they do that goes against truth resolves the story for a happy ending. So the dwarfs are super sad when she dies. They are covered. She's not dead, but after the kiss, she lives forever after. What does she learn on the way? Jealousy will end up dead through dancing. So bad things come to you if you do too much. If you are, excuse me, hello? Hi. If you are doing too much dancing or too much looking in the mirror, thinking about yourself, you'll come eventually to be a bad person, jealous, and dead through excess dancing. If you do good work, resist temptation, eventually you'll be happy. Now, of course, it relies on the prince. The prince and the king is absolutely essential. You have the dwarf helping you by building the coffin or telling you what to do, but it's the prince and return to the hierarchy that makes Snow White go back to her place. My imagination is that she was mostly happy when she was in the hut of the dwarfs in the forest, because there she had a nice happy life with them. 7 husbands after all. Who could be sad about that? Okay, after the break, I want you to think about a Vietnamese story that I'm going to tell you about that I'm sure you know. But Tang Yong, which we'll try and understand in this same way. Whether it tells us anything or not, I don't know. Break. Thank you. And stop recording. 10-minute break. We'll start again in a bit.